What if the voice inside your head that replays every worst-case scenario could be quieted with a few practical moves you can use today? This audio guide strips overthinking of its false dignity and treats it as a predictable habit you can diagnose, test, and replace. You will learn precise mental rules to stop the spin, simple experiments that expose which worries matter and which are noise. Chapter 1. Naming the spin and stopping the machine. Overthinking feels internal and personal, but the first practical move is externalizing it. Give it a name, map its rhythm, and treat it like a machine you can adjust rather than a flaw you must endure. Start tonight with a single diagnostic exercise. When a worry cycle begins, write down the exact thought and the time it started. Note what triggered it and how long it lasts before you act. Over a week, you will see patterns, certain topics, times of day, or bodily states that reliably spin the machine. One client discovered that most of her worst spirals began between 9 and 11 p.m. after a day of fragmented work. Naming the pattern let her schedule a simple countermeasure, a 10-minute unwinding ritual at 8:30, and the late-night loops dwindled. Naming reduces mystique. Once the pattern is visible, apply a simple intervention called the 3-minute timeout. When a thought loop begins, stand, breathe for 3 full breaths, and say out loud, "I notice my mind starting to spin." Chapter 2, the decision rule: choose fast tests over endless research. One of the core engines of overthinking is the illusion that more information will produce certainty. It rarely does. Instead of infinite research, design a decision rule that values a small, fast test over additional data accumulation. Begin by framing your next uncertain choice as a hypothesis. If X is true, then Y will happen within Z time. Keep Z short: 1 day, 3 days, 1 week, so feedback arrives quickly. Chapter 3. Time boxing: thought and action to reclaim attention. Thought is a finite resource. If you allow it to wander all day, decision quality and mood deteriorate. Time boxing is a deceptively simple discipline that restores finite boundaries. Reserve 2 kinds of boxes on your calendar: a worry processing box and an execution box. The worry box is a daily 20 to 40-minute slot devoted solely to reviewing items from the parking lot, testing hypotheses, and scheduling real actions. If a worry arises outside this box, you defer it, note it, and return to the present. The execution box is a focused chunk where you do the most important work without permitting meta-thinking about all possible contingencies. This separation prevents analytical rumination from invading action time. Use visible timers and a short ritual to begin each box. Stand, 3 breaths, a statement of intention. Another trick is to set a nightly consolidation box of 10 minutes to clear the day's residual concerns into the parking lot and schedule next step tests. Doing this consistently reduces late-night loops that eat sleep. Chapter 4. The worry: audit which thoughts deserve energy. Not all worries are equivalent. A worry audit helps you allocate your scarce attention to concerns with real expected value. Start by capturing every recurring worry for a week in raw form. Then rate each worry on 2 axes: probability and impact. Probability asks, how likely is this scenario to occur within the next year? Impact asks, if it occurs, how much would it affect your life on a scale of 1 to 10? Multiply the 2 scores to get a priority metric. Low probability and low impact worries go into a low priority folder and are deferred to monthly review. High probability and high impact worries are candidates for immediate small tests or contingency planning. Many overthinkers are surprised to find that most of their mental bandwidth was devoted to low productivity, low priority items. The audit also reveals cognitive biases. Availability bias inflates perceived probability, and catastrophizing inflates impact. When you see statistics, thinking becomes quieter. Chapter 5. Rituals that interrupt rumination and reset the nervous system. Overthinking is embodied. It lives in the body as much as in thoughts. Interrupt rituals are short, physical or sensory practices that break cognitive loops and reset arousal. Effective rituals are simple, repeatable, and portable. One example is the 5-breath anchor. Inhale for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 6. Repeat 5 times. This pattern downregulates the sympathetic system and increases clarity. Another is the movement microburst. Stand, do 90 seconds of brisk movement, march in place, air squats, or a quick sun salutation, and then resit. Physical activation often clears stuck mental energy and creates an easier threshold for decision. Chapter 6. Cognitive reframing. From catastrophe to problem solving, overthinking loves stories of catastrophe because they are emotionally gripping even when improbable. Cognitive reframing converts catastrophic narratives into practical problems to be solved. When a catastrophic scenario arises, ask 3 rapid, constraining questions. What exactly can I influence in the next 24 hours? What information would disconfirm my worst case? And what is one reversible step I can test? Replacing a sprawling worst-case montage with these specific prompts converts anxiety into a small action plan. For example, instead of imagining losing an entire contract and spiraling into long-term ruin, a reframed schedule might identify the single metric that predicts contract health, design a 1-week check with the client, and propose a focused intervention if the metric declines. Reframing reduces narrative drama and restores agency. Chapter 7. Information. Diet, stop feeding the beast. Excess information amplifies uncertainty. Overthinkers often believe more data reduces doubt, but uncurated intake tends to increase ambiguity and generate more questions. Conduct an information diet audit for 1 week and note sources, time spent, and emotional reaction. Cut or limit sources that consistently escalate anxiety without producing useful decisions. Create a small, trusted source list of 2 to 4 reliable inputs for any topic you care about, and schedule short, focused review sessions rather than constant scanning. Also implement a pre-commitment. No news, social media, or complex reading in the hour before your worry-prone window. Digital fasting reduces the raw material for spirals. Chapter 8. Accepting uncertainty as a skill, not a failure. A defining feature of overthinking is intolerance of uncertainty. The practical switch is to treat uncertainty as the normal condition of important decisions and to build tolerance through repeated exposure. Start with micro-exposures. Choose a small daily decision where you deliberately accept an ambiguous outcome and limit your control. Perhaps order a meal you have never tried, or send a brief speculative email without perfect wording. Notice the anxiety and let it pass without additional compensatory action. Gradually increase exposure size. Parallel to exposure, create a cognitive script. Uncertainty is a fact of important choices. My job is to learn fast. Chapter 9. Behavioral experiments. Turning worry into testable hypotheses. Transforming worry into an experiment is the single most effective technique for chronic overthinking. Start by restating your worry as a falsifiable hypothesis. I believe X will happen if Y is true. Then design the smallest possible test that could disconfirm the belief within a short window. For example, if you fear that a new product idea has no appeal, run a 2-day landing page test with a simple call to action. If you fear a social message will be misunderstood, run a quick read by 2 trusted colleagues and note their reactions. Keep experiments cheap, fast, and reversible. Record the outcome in a 2-line log and decide the next step based on evidence. The key psychological benefit is a repeated cycle of evidence updating. When your brain experiences a reliable update pattern, it learns to prefer information gathering through tests rather than endless mental simulation. Over months, this retrains the mind to trust iterative learning and massively reduces the time spent spinning scenarios with no actionable path. Chapter 10. The Role of Sleep and Metabolic Health in Thought Control. Cognitive control depends heavily on physiological state. Sleep deprivation, poor glucose regulation, and chronic dehydration amplify worry and reduce the prefrontal cortex's capacity to down-regulate intrusive thoughts. Prioritize sleep as a non-negotiable baseline for mental clarity. A practical program starts with a fixed wake time, a wind-down ritual that removes screens at least 30 minutes before bed, and a simple pre-bed breathing routine. Address sugar and caffeine. Avoid large late-afternoon caffeine doses and replace sugary snacks with protein-rich options that stabilize blood sugar and reduce jittery anxiety. Hydration matters. Keep a water bottle visible and sip regularly, because even mild dehydration can heighten perceived stress. When physiological baselines improve, you will find thoughts less reactive and more manageable. Treat metabolic health as an upstream lever for thought regulation rather than an optional wellness project. Chapter 11. Social mirrors. Use others to reality test your worries. Your internal loop can be distorted by biased sampling of imagined outcomes. Use social mirrors, short conversations with trusted people, to reality test spinning thoughts. The structure is important. Don't dump the entire narrative. Instead, give a 1-sentence summary and one clear question. Is this realistic? And what would you do next? Limit sessions to 10 minutes, so feedback is focused and avoids becoming another area for over-analysis. Rotate mirrors for different domains: work, relationships, health. So advice is specialized. Use one external consistency check per week for recurring worries rather than daily calls to avoid outsourcing constant reassurance. Social mirrors provide perspective, reveal blind spots, and supply simple next steps that break the loop of internal echoing. Chapter 12. Commitment devices that stop rewinding for good. Commitment devices convert intention into structure so you cannot endlessly reevaluate. Use small public commitments, calendar deadlines, or monetary stakes to lock in decisions. For instance, publish a soft deadline for a draft to a small list and treat that public notice as a trigger. Social accountability raises the cost of perpetual delay. Financial stakes can work for behavior change. Put a small sum on the line that you forfeit if you miss the deadline. Another device is structural partitioning. Break a large project into micro deadlines with clear deliverables so you can decide incrementally rather than ruminating on the whole. The psychological logic is simple. If you cannot endlessly rewind a choice, you stop wasting cycles, deciding, and start learning. Commitment devices are scaffolds that protect attention from the seduction of hypotheticals. Chapter 13. Mindfulness Techniques, tailored for the overthinker. Mindfulness helps, but generic practice can feel abstract. Tailored techniques that target overthinking include focused labeling and anchor shifts. Focused labeling means naming the exact category of the thought, planning, regret, fear of rejection, and then gently returning to a neutral anchor like breath or body sensation for 10 breaths. Naming reduces emotional charge and interrupts escalation. Anchor shifts are short sensory redirects. Hold a small object and notice texture, temperature, and weight for 60 seconds. Sensory detail pulls cognition away from abstract spirals and into the present. Practice these techniques twice daily. Short, consistent practice builds tolerance for mental noise and improves the ability to choose attention rather than be chosen by it. Chapter 14. Relearning confidence by compounding. Small wins. Confidence is not a feeling that precedes action. It is an emergent property of repeated, competent micro-decisions. Design a 30-day win ledger. Each day, commit to one small, high-leverage action. Answer one overdue email, send one draft, make one call, and mark it complete. The visible chain of completes trains your brain to expect success and reduces the anticipatory dread that fuels overthinking. Celebrate small wins briefly. Note them in a 3-line gratitude log, and then move to the next task. Over time, the accumulation of small successes provides robust evidence against the inner narratives that claim you are indecisive or incompetent. Chapter 15. Maintenance. Protocols. Weekly, monthly, quarterly. Checks. Stop treating thought management as ad hoc and design a maintenance rhythm. Weekly, run a 20-minute review, clear the parking lot, schedule one experiment, and note one boundary to protect next week. Monthly, perform a worry audit update and adjust your information diet. Quarterly, run a deeper review, inspect sleep, movement, social mirrors, and major decision rules, and set one new exposure to uncertainty to expand tolerance. These maintenance rituals prevent drift, keep your tools sharp, and ensure that overthinking never again becomes a steady-state default. Consistency with simple protocols is the practical antidote to chronic rumination. Small scheduled attention beats constant unstructured worry every time. Chapter 16. Embracing productive uncertainty. Overthinking often hides behind a promise that certainty exists if you look long enough, and the cruel truth is that most meaningful choices remain uncertain no matter how much data you pile up. Productive uncertainty is the habit of treating unknowns as the raw material for small, reversible action rather than as permanent paralysis. Start by changing the story you tell yourself about ambiguity. Uncertainty is not a flaw in your thinking, but a feature of complex life that rewards iterative moves. One practical shift is to reduce the horizon of your worries. Instead of imagining all possible outcomes across years, ask what you can learn in the next week and make that your primary test. This narrows the field and converts anxiety into a manageable experiment. Use real examples. If you are worried that a new service will not attract customers, create a minimal version and expose it to a tiny, relevant audience for 3 days. If you fear a career pivot, arrange 2 informational interviews this week to gather directional data. Productive uncertainty requires explicit safeguards, so experiments remain reversible and inexpensive. Chapter 17. The social cost of overthinking and how to repair. Overthinking does not occur in isolation. It often spills into relationships as indecision, repeated reassurance seeking, or withdrawn avoidance, and those patterns have real social costs. People become frustrated when plans are perpetually tentative or exhausted by repeated retellings of the same problem. The repair work begins with honest recognition and a small public contract. Admit to one close person that you have a pattern of overprocessing and propose a simple rule. Before we revisit a decision more than twice, we will run one brief experiment or consult one external source. Framing the contract as a mutual improvement effort reduces shame and invites collaboration. Another effective repair is to externalize the decision process with clear artifacts. Replace repeated verbal loops with a shared document that lists the question, what you know, what you will test, and a deadline. This moves the burden from memory and conversation into an accountable artifact and prevents relationships from becoming the repository of unresolved worry. Use examples from real life. A manager who repeatedly delayed hires fixed the pattern by publishing a short rubric and 2-week testing plan. The team reported relief because ambiguity had been tamed into a concrete timeline. Repair also includes changing how you ask for support. Chapter 18. Designing your decision rituals. Decision rituals are predictable sequences you run when a choice matters enough to merit process, but not so large that paralysis is inevitable. A reliable ritual reduces emotional noise and increases speed. Start by defining a compact template you will use for important but reversible choices. Clarify the question in a single sentence, list the 3 most relevant facts, state one small test you can run within a week, and set a specific decision date. Write this template out once and use it until it feels like muscle memory. Rituals can be tailored by domain. For professional choices include a 2-source rule. For personal choices include a 1-week pause before committing. Importantly, rituals must include a stop condition. If the test yields ambiguous results, commit to a fallback that preserves momentum rather than reopening the entire problem. For instance, if a marketing test is inconclusive, commit to a scaled repeat with minor variation rather than shelving the idea indefinitely.